America, the land of open doors, it's an image so many of us have, right? Especially thinking back to the early days.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson himself, talking about rapid population by as great importations of foreigners as possible.
Sounds wide open.
Exactly, like this unbreakable welcome mat. But what's really striking and maybe kind of unsettling is how fast that shifted for certain groups in ways our history books sometimes just gloss over. How did that actually start to, fall apart?
Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today in this deep dive. We're looking at sources like Michael Luo's book, Strangers in the Land. It's this really powerful look at the epic and often pretty painful story of Chinese immigration.
Yeah.
And our goal, really, is to try and understand how a country that seemed to welcome newcomers could then systematically exclude an entire group based purely on race.
Right.
And the ripple effect, I mean, they're huge. And you'll hear about some incredible resilience, too, stories of resistance that often just don't get told.
So for you listening, this deep dive is really about tracing how America's view of Chinese immigrants changed so dramatically. And maybe what lessons does this difficult history hold for us now? About belonging, exclusion, all of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's go back. 1840s, 1850s. This idea of Gold Mountain, that's what they called America. It sounds incredibly appealing.
Totally.
You had American shipping companies actually advertising in China, promising big houses, saying everyone is equal here. That must have been a huge draw.
Oh, absolutely. A powerful lure.
And it worked. 1852 alone, over 20,000 Chinese arrived in San Francisco. That's a massive jump from just a few years before.
A huge influx, yeah.
So what happened when they actually got to Gold Mountain? Did that promise hold up?
Sadly, no. That initial promise just seemed to sour, almost immediately.
Really?
Yeah, it's striking how fast that welcome turned ugly as the numbers grew. And it wasn't just about, say, competition for jobs. It quickly became what sources call a racial conflagration.
Wow. So right away.
Pretty much. In the gold mines in California, the reality was brutal. Chinese miners were often stuck working claims white miners had already abandoned.
Leftovers, basically.
Exactly. Patiently scratching out maybe $2 or $3 a day. But, even with that, some still found incredible fortunes. There's this one story.
Yeah.
A group of Chinese miners found a 240-pound gold nugget. Huge. Worth maybe $50,000 back then.
Incredible.
But they actually sanded it down into smaller pieces. Why? To avoid unwanted attention from white miners.
Wow. That tells you everything, doesn't it? The level of fear.
It really does, needing to hide that kind of luck.
And that resentment, it found a political voice pretty quickly, too. Governor John Bigler, his re-election campaign in 1852.
Right. He saw which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah, he jumped on that rising anti-Chinese feeling. And he started painting this picture of them as coolie laborers.
Which was mostly false, right?
Totally misleading.
Yeah.
Implying they were all bound by these awful contracts, almost like enslaved Africans, he suggested. A threat to free white labor.
Ah, the threat narrative.
Exactly. And this whole anti-coolieism thing became this really flexible, racist tool. You could use it to say they were unfree and a danger to white workers.
So, facing that kind of attack from the top, was there any pushback, any organized resistance to these, lies? Or were they just overwhelmed?
That's such a key question. Because, yeah, despite all that pressure, there was resistance.
Yeah.
Right away. Really powerful stuff.
Like what?
Well, you had figures like two Chinese merchants, Hua and Tong Achik. They wrote these strong rebuttals, got them published in newspapers across the country, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And Tong Achik, he spoke English, was a Christian convert, became a really influential go-between for the community.
Okay.
And they made it clear. Most Chinese came voluntarily. They weren't coolies. They directly challenged the governor.
That's incredibly brave and important, right, to challenge that narrative immediately.
Absolutely. It shows how vital it is to have those counter-narratives, especially when powerful people are spreading falsehoods. Truth as a weapon, even if it doesn't always win right away.
But despite those efforts, the legal system started to, bake in the discrimination.
Yeah, deeply entrenched. That notorious People v. Hall case in California, 1854. Stark example.
What did that do again?
It basically said Chinese testimony was inadmissible against a white person.
Wow. So legally silenced in court if the defendant was white.
Exactly. It wasn't just a setback. It made them legally invisible in California courts. Stripped away their basic right to defend themselves against white individuals.
And the reasoning behind it. It's chilling when you read it.
Tell us.
Chief Justice Hugh Campbell Murray. He took this existing law about Indians not testifying and just stretched it to include the whole of the Mongolian race.
Just lump them all together?
Yep, and he was explicit about why. To protect the white person. He literally felt that if Chinese people could testify, next thing you know, they'd want all the equal rights of citizenship.
Oh, my God.
He imagined them at the polls, in the jury box, upon the bench, and in our legislative halls.
So it wasn't just about court testimony. It was about stopping any path to equality. Full stop.
Precisely. Cementing that racial hierarchy legally.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving into the 1860s, 70s. The Transcontinental Railroad.
Ah, yes. The great nation-building project.
Seen as this, like, hopeless fantasy initially. Huge obstacles, physically, financially.
Seemed impossible to many.
But Chinese labor, which often gets, downplayed or ignored.
Made it possible, absolutely.
We see figures like Hung Hua, this enterprising labor contractor. He supplied hundreds of Chinese workers to the Central Pacific. He's on the payroll records as early as 1864.
And this is where you see that fascinating paradox, especially with someone like Leland Stanford.
Right, one of the big railroad barons.
Yeah. Publicly, he was known to, rail against the Chinese, strong anti-immigrant talk.
Standard political rhetoric at the time, sadly.
But privately, he employed Chinese people in his own home. His cook, Mo Jin Ki. His gardener, Jin Mun.
Seriously.
Yeah. And Jane Stanford, Leland's wife, apparently even offered to adopt Jin Mun.
That's quite a contradiction.
Isn't it? It really highlights that bizarre split between public rhetoric and private reality. Holding these prejudices, but also relying on and even forming connections with the very people you're demonizing publicly.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around. But even facing that, in 1867, something incredible happened. 3,000 Chinese railroad workers went on strike.
An amazing feat of collective action for that era.
For higher wages, shorter hours, just audacious, really. Unrivaled in scale for its time.
But the response was swift and brutal.
Yeah. Charles Crocker, another Central Pacific leader, just cut off their food and supplies, starved them back to work.
Shows the immense power imbalance they were up against.
Absolutely. And it's tough because most of these workers, their names are lost to history.
Right. In the official records, they're often just listed as, China Ben, Tom, a deliberate kind of erasure.
But occasionally, stories slip through, like Mock Chuck.
Yeah, Mock Chuck. He started as an herbalist, became headman for the workers, and later a pretty successful labor contractor himself for the Southern Pacific.
So glimpses of individual lives, contributions, perseverance.
Exactly. But it highlights how hard it is to recover those marginalized histories, to give voice to the people who built so much and got so little credit.
Meanwhile, back in Washington by 1870, the whole debate about who could become a citizen, naturalization, it really heated up. You had Senator Charles Sumner, a former abolitionist, making this powerful argument. He said naturalization laws should be without distinction of color.
Harking back to the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, explicitly citing all men are created equal.
But the opposition was fierce and revealing.
Tell us about that.
Senator William Stewart threatened a filibuster. He framed the Chinese again as these coolie threats and asked this really chilling question.
What was it?
Do you want to have the Chinese slaughtered on the Pacific coast? Do you want their extermination? Just openly suggesting violence?
And others?
Senator George Williams just scoffed at the Declaration of Independence, said Mongolians were unassimilable, claimed they'd never amalgamate with persons of European descent.
So it lays bare how that economic fear and racial prejudice just combined to justify exclusion.
Exactly. Even if it meant trampling on America's own founding ideals, it shows how fragile those ideals can be when people feel threatened.
And that kind of talk, that harsh rhetoric, it tragically spilled over into actual horrific violence. Yeah. The Los Angeles Massacre, 1871.
A terrible event. It started with some internal community disputes over vice property.
But quickly spiraled.
Yeah, into a mob riot targeting all Chinese people in the area. The violence was just brutal.
Why?
Cries of rope, more rope. People were beaten, shot, hanged from wagons, from iron bars. Just horrific.
It's unbelievable.
There's this account of an attorney, Henry Hazard, asking the mob if a man was guilty before they hanged him. Their reply?
What?
He's a Chinaman. That was enough.
Chilling. Just dehumanizing. And the aftermath? Was there justice?
Severely limited. The district attorney focused mainly on the murder of one well-known herbalist, Jean Tong.
Just one victim?
Primarily, yes. And while a few rioters were convicted of manslaughter, it really just underscores how deep the racial bias ran, even in the legal system. It wasn't about equal justice.
And beyond these huge, awful massacres, daily life was filled with harassment, too, right?
Oh, constantly. Kids pulling cues, throwing rocks or garbage, police being largely indifferent.
Like that story of George Lamb being told to just run along home.
Exactly. A picture of just constant, low-level fear and indignity.
And then came laws specifically designed to make life difficult, like the Cubic Air Ordinance in 1870.
Right. Sounds like a health regulation, maybe.
That was the pretext. It required 500 cubic feet of living space per adult.
Which clearly targeted crowded Chinese living quarters.
Absolutely. It labeled their communities a moral leper, basically gave authorities an easy way to legally harass them, raid their homes, control their spaces.
It's a classic example, isn't it? Using health and safety as a weapon for discrimination.
Which brings us right into the main era of exclusion. We're talking 1880s, early 1900s.
Yeah, things really ramped up.
Dennis Kearney, the Working Men's Party of California, founded 1877.
Became hugely influential.
Their slogan, "The Chinese must go." It wasn't subtle.
No. It became this powerful rallying cry. It influenced state politics massively. It even showed up on election ballots.
A picture of a boot kicking a Chinese man.
Yeah, the WPC boot kicking him out shows how mainstream and accepted that sentiment was.
And all this built towards the big one, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882.
The first major federal law restricting immigration based on nationality banned Chinese laborers for 10 years initially.
And the arguments for it in Congress.
Senator John Franklin Miller basically said assimilation was impossible, use that metaphor. Like the mixing of oil and water, neither will absorb the other. Called them invaders.
Just outright racist justifications. Was there any opposition?
There was. Senator George F. Hoare gave this really powerful dissent, reminded everyone of America's founding ideals.
What did he say?
He argued that maybe the reason Chinese immigrants weren't rushing to become Christians or Republicans could be accounted for by the treatment they have received.
Calling out the hypocrisy.
Directly. A stark reminder of how those principles were being betrayed.
And the impact of the act itself. The Supreme Court weighed in pretty quickly.
Yeah. Che Chan-ping v. United States in 1889. A crucial case.
How did it decide?
It upheld Congress's power to exclude immigrants, even if it violated existing treaties.
So Congress could just override international agreements based on race?
Essentially, yes. Che Chan-ping himself had a valid certificate saying he could return to the U.S., he'd lived there, worked there.
Didn't matter.
Nope, he was deported. His American Odyssey, as Luo calls it, was over. Set a really dangerous precedent about congressional power over individual rights and treaties.
And things only got tougher from there. The Geary Act, 1892.
Right. That intensified exclusion. It required all Chinese laborers already in the U.S. to register and carry these residency certificates.
The ones often called dog tags.
Exactly. And if you didn't register, deportation.
What was the response from the Chinese community? Did they just comply?
No way. Massive resistance, actually. The Chinese Six Companies, this influential community organization, urged people to defy the law.
Really? That's risky.
Totally. And they raised an incredible $100,000 for legal defense funds. That level of organization and defiance against such an oppressive law is remarkable.
But enforcement still happened, sometimes brutally.
Oh, yeah. You see examples like in Redlands, California. Local officials just went after warrants, arrested people, deported them. The Chinese population there dropped from 200 to like 50.
Wow. And that ledger in Downeyville.
Yeah, the constable, John T. Mason, keeping a detailed photographic ledger, names, ages, jobs, physical details like a crooked little finger.
It's so systematic, dehumanizing, reducing people to data points for control.
Absolutely. And this period saw the federal government really build up its machinery for exclusion. Around 1900, the Office of the Commissioner General of Immigration really centralized control. And the guys running it, like Terrence Powderly and Frank Sargent, were fiercely anti-Chinese.
So the bias was right at the top.
Baked into the system. They mandated these incredibly invasive physical exams for new arrivals.
What did that involve?
Stripping naked. Measuring skulls, hands, feet, eyes, nose, mouth. Looking for calluses to prove someone was a laborer, even if they claimed otherwise.
It's awful.
As the Chinese intellectual Liang Qikao put it back then, the Chinese immigrants coming to America have not yet committed any crimes, but they are treated as criminals.
That sums it up perfectly. Criminalized just for arriving.
And that treatment continued at places like Angel Island.
Right. The immigration station in San Francisco Bay opened in 1910, often called the Ellis Island of the West.
But a key difference, right? Ellis Island was mostly about processing. Angel Island was primarily about detention and deterrence.
Designed to keep people out.
Exactly. You read the petitions sent by detainees complaining about the conditions, dungeon-like barracks, bad food. It was grim.
And the personal accounts really drive it home.
They do. John Monfong arrived 1931, just 18 years old. He recalled, "The Americans treated us like cattle." Talked about being forced to strip, jump like monkeys during the exams.
It's just degrading.
And he also mentioned the poetry. Hundreds of poems carved into the wooden walls of the barracks by the people held there.
Poetry, what do they say?
Expressing everything: grief, anger, longing for family, frustration with the injustice. These individual voices, literally etched into the walls of their prison, they just cut through all the bureaucratic coldness. Incredible resilience.
Even with this whole legal exclusion framework, localized violence didn't stop either.
Sadly, no. Like the Eureka expulsion in 1885, a mob tried to hang Charlie Whalum, who was a Christian convert.
What stopped them?
A local reverend, Reverend Rich, heroically stood in front of him and said, "If you hang him, you'll hang him over my dead body."
Wow. Incredible courage.
And then there was the Rock Springs Massacre, also 1885.
In Wyoming, right.
Yeah. White miners attacked the Chinese quarter, killed 28 people, injured 15 more, burned down their homes.
Just horrific.
A survivor, Leo Karkwang, described the Chinese residents fleeing like a flock of frightened sheep. Utter terror.
Was anyone held accountable?
The rioters were acquitted. No surprise there, unfortunately. But what's interesting is the diplomatic angle.
How so?
The Chinese minister back in Washington, D.C. actually pushed the U.S. government hard. He cited times China had paid the U.S. for losses Americans suffered there.
Heard the tables a bit.
Exactly. And he actually secured nearly $150,000 in indemnification from the U.S. government for the Rock Springs victims and damages.
Huh. So even in injustice, you see these glimmers of international power dynamics at play, forcing some accountability, even if the local justice system failed.
Precisely. It reveals those deeper layers.
Okay, let's move into the early 20th century, maybe up to the mid-century. We start seeing a shift, right? The emergence of a distinctly Chinese-American identity.
Yeah, people born here navigating this complex space.
You had leaders like Wang Qinfu with the Chinese Equal Rights League. He started a newspaper, the Chinese Weekly News, in 1893.
And what was his message?
He was actively encouraging Chinese people to claim their place. Become an American citizen, he wrote. Speak the English language, wear American dress, enter into politics the same as any other Irishman.
So a call for assimilation and political participation despite the hostility.
Exactly. But this new identity came with its own real struggles, what some call the problem of maladjustment.
Maladjustment. Explain that.
Well, Kit King Louie wrote this thesis in 1931, based on almost 100 interviews with American-born Chinese.
And what did she find?
They felt caught, stuck between their parents' traditional culture and the American society they were born into, which constantly discriminated against them. In what ways?
Pools, beaches, housing, finding jobs. Constant barriers. As one person put it, legally, we are American citizens. But in fact, we are the men without a country.
Wow, that hits hard. What does belonging even mean when your own country rejects you at every turn?
That's the question, isn't it?
And you see this struggle in individual lives.
Mm.
Like Mimi Lone, first Asian-American reporter at a major U.S. paper in 1926.
Pioneering.
Yeah, but she talked about initially resenting her Chinese identity. Even the fact that she spoke perfect, accentless English surprised people. Shows the boxes they put her in.
The assumptions.
Right. And later, she married a white reporter, but she kept it secret from her parents.
Why?
Fear of their reaction, partly, but also just how rare and frowned upon interracial marriage was then. Huge pressure to conform, to hide parts of yourself.
At the same time, though, there was this ongoing fight, a really fundamental one for family unity.
Which the Exclusion Acts made almost impossible.
Exactly. And figures like Yu Chung-hong stepped up. He was the first Chinese attorney to pass the California bar, became president of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance.
A real leader?
And in 1928, he went to Congress, lobbied them to allow Chinese wives of American citizens into the country.
What was his argument?
Simple, powerful. He said, "A law permanently separating a husband from his wife is an unnatural law," appealing to basic human rights against this backdrop of legal exclusion.
Then the world stage dramatically changes things. World War II.
Right. China becomes an ally against Japan.
And suddenly America's treatment of Chinese Americans becomes Awkward.
Very awkward. Japanese propaganda actually used it against the US. They dropped leaflets saying things like, America is China's ally, but can you go to America? Can you become citizens? No. Americans do not want you.
Oof. Using America's own hypocrisy as a weapon.
Exactly. That external pressure, combined with decades of activism from within, finally created a real push for change.
Which led to the repeal of China's exclusion in 1943.
Yes, people like the writer Pearl S. Buck and her husband Richard Walsh were key advocates. They framed repeal as vital for the war effort for America's image.
So a major victory.
A victory, yes, but a limited one. It made Chinese eligible for naturalization, which was huge. But
There's always a but.
yeah, it imposed this tiny annual quota, only 105 Chinese immigrants allowed per year.
105, that's it.
That's it, and it explicitly wasn't full quota parity with European countries. So progress, yes, but still unequal, still shaped by strategic needs more than pure equity.
Okay, so exclusion ends, but the story doesn't just become simple after that. The Cold War kicks in.
Right. Communist China rises in 1949, then the Korean War. New fears, new anxieties about Chinese immigrants and loyalty emerge.
And this leads to the whole Paper Sun era investigations, right?
Exactly. The U.S. government gets really worried about wholesale fraud in immigration.
Explain Paper Suns again briefly.
Because legal immigration was basically impossible for decades, many Chinese men got into the U.S. using documents that falsely claimed they were the sons of Chinese American citizens already here, buying or fabricating papers, often the only way.
A desperate measure born out of exclusion.
Totally. But now, in the Cold War climate, the government launches these massive investigations, especially out of Hong Kong.
And they were tough.
Oh, yeah. Brazen tactics, Luo calls them. Surprise pre-dawn raids. Heavy reliance on informants pressuring people to confess.
And confessions had wider impacts.
Huge impacts. They created these terrible chain reactions. One person confesses, implicates their paper relatives, who then might implicate actual relatives. These interlocking grenades, as one official called them, could destroy entire families, revoke citizenship, shatter communities.
The human cost must have been immense.
Devastating. Look at the story of the Chung family. Zheng Tong, the father, was a paper son. When his paper brother confessed back in the U.S., Zheng Tong fled to Hong Kong.
Why?
He was terrified his own children, born in the U.S., would lose their citizenship because of his status.
Did they?
His daughter, Laura Lai, actually did lose her U.S. citizenship for 10 years. His wife died while they were separated in Hong Kong. He eventually got back to the U.S. himself, only to die of cancer a week later.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. The fear, the separation, the long-term damage caused by these policies.
It's a gut-wrenching example of the human toll.
And then there's Sing Ki's story. Quite different, but also revealing.
Yeah, Sing Ki. He was a decorated World War I hero, received the Distinguished Service Cross for incredible bravery on the battlefield in France.
A war hero.
Absolutely. Later became a well-known immigration broker in New York's Chinatown, helping people navigate the system.
Okay.
But he got caught up in these fraud investigations. Accused and convicted of orchestrating passport fraud, served prison time.
A war hero.
Yeah.
Imprisoned for immigration fraud.
Yes. And there were later claims that the witnesses against him had actually lied in exchange for getting their own citizenship issues resolved.
So, potentially falsely accused.
It's contested, but the irony is profound. He was eventually interred with honors at Arlington National Cemetery.
Wow. From war hero to convicted felon back to honored veteran, it really makes you ask, how does a society square its ideals with these discriminatory practices, even impacting its own heroes?
That conflict runs deep.
But then, a real sea change happens. 1965, the Immigration Act.
The big one, often called the Hart-Celler Act.
And politicians at the time didn't really expect it to change things that much, did they?
No, they really misjudged its impact. They thought it would still favor European immigration, but it completely abolished the old national origins quota system that was inherently racist.
And the result?
It just unleashed a tide of immigration from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, completely transforming the country's demographics over the following decades.
A fundamental shift.
Absolutely fundamental. And that's the reality we see today. Since 1965, roughly a quarter of all immigrants to the U.S. have been Asian.
A quarter? Wow.
Yeah. And today, there are over 5 million Chinese Americans. It just shows the massive long-term power of policy changes, how demographics shift, and how the country continues to be redefined, maybe finally moving closer to that original idea of open doors, but, after a very long, very painful history of exclusion.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Over a century of Chinese American history in this deep dive. Stories of welcome turning to exclusion, incredible resilience, resistance, and then finally a kind of integration, though maybe still incomplete.
Yeah, it's a complex journey. And the Chinese American experience, it really serves as this powerful lens, doesn't it? A way to measure America's promises against its actual practices, especially how it treats marginalized groups.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder what biases, what assumptions, maybe ones we don't even see clearly, are shaping our immigration debates today. And looking back at this history, what can we learn to try and build a more genuinely inclusive future for everyone?
Definitely something to think about, something to explore further on your own.